and tell about what we are doing in Norfund. Norfund is the Norwegian government's investment fund for developing countries. We focus on countries in sub-Saharan Africa and LDC countries, other places in the world. We focus on investment in renewable energy, and we focus on investment in financial institutions and agribusiness. Most of our investments are done as equity capital because that's the type of capital that is most scarce. To get a loan, you need equity, and equity is a really scarce type of capital in developing countries. I will start with this. I have to turn. Yeah. This quote of Kofi Annan. It is the absence of business, not its presence, that lead to widespread poverty. Business is driven by trade and investments, and I will mostly talk about investments today. But first, why is creating businesses so important? Economic growth is essential to alleviate poverty. There's a strong correlation between economic growth and poverty alleviation and human development. This graph shows that countries with high growth also has managed to reduce poverty. Countries like Vietnam and China has had very high economic growth, and they have also managed to lift a lot of people out from poverty. And in the down left corner, you can see sub-Saharan African countries, especially with low growth and low reduction of poverty. If you look at this graph, you can see that there's a very strong correlation between economic growth and human development indicators, such as children mortality and life expectancy. Countries that has had high growth has reduced the mortality rate, and the life expectancy has improved. There also is a very close connection between the access to energy and poverty alleviation. This graph shows that countries with a high degree of access to electricity also has managed to reduce poverty very much. On the other side, countries with low degree of access to energy has a large part of the population living below the poverty line. There is a large potential to build or to provide more power to the poor countries. This graph shows that in the countries with a high number of people without electricity, there is also a huge potential for building more electricity, clean electricity, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, in Asia, and in Latin America. It's a great potential. But what is common to all these areas is too little capital available, and as I mentioned, it's especially too little equity capital. There has been a shift in the world economy during the last 10-15 years. Earlier, the OECD countries, the rich part of the world, experienced a steady high growth rate, but from during the last 10 or 15 years, that growth rate has declined. And as this graph shows, the OECD countries now experience a growth rate between 0 and 1%. On the other hand, the low-income countries and middle-income countries has increased their growth rate considerably. So this is a very good and positive development in the world. We have a boom, or a more booming economy in the low-income countries and the middle-income countries. But the bad thing is that the OECD countries no longer are that tool for the world economy that they were earlier. So the rich countries are struggling with their own economy, and with a low growth rate, they will not expand their demand for products at that degree as they did before. But the high growth rate in the poorer countries is very positive. They are developing local markets. We can experience that in, for example, East Africa, where the East African community is starting to work. Countries like Kenya and Tanzania has become the most important economic partners to each other. But earlier they mostly exported to the Western world. Now they trade with each other. So the positive development in the poor countries is creating local markets and more sound economies in those countries. And this graph shows that the poverty rate has declined very much in sub-Saharan Africa during the last 10 to 15 years. At the same time, the growth rate with the GDP growth has increased. So there's a lot of optimism in many countries. But, on the other hand, unemployment is increasing heavily. Demographic factors, better health, migration to the big cities leads to an enormous employment challenge in many developing countries. Especially among young, educated people. This graph shows the number of young people between 20 and 24 years in Africa, heavily increasing, but the number of jobs are not increasing at the same pace. So more and better jobs are needed, especially among educated youth. This high degree of increase in unemployment creates fear of instability in many countries. The capital is very scarce. It's difficult to raise capital to do the necessary investments. Interest rates are very high in many countries. And the politicians, we hear from politicians in the countries where we operate, that they ask for more investments. Foreign direct investments are needed and wanted in many countries. And that is what Norfund is doing. Norfund is a part of Norwegian development aid policy. Our mandate is to develop sustainable businesses by providing capital. The objective is to establish viable, profitable undertakings that would not otherwise be established because of high risk. We operate on commercial terms, so we do investments in companies together with other commercial investors. We usually invest 20 to 30% of the capital in a company. We always invest together with partners. We have approximately 9 billion Norwegian kroner in our fund. Thanks to the government who provided us with another 1.2 billion this year. Our strategy is to concentrate and do our business in countries and sectors and regions where we can make a difference. So we have concentrated our activity in 4 regions. The most important or highest priority is given by our owner, the Norwegian government, is to give priority to Sub-Saharan Africa. And we are operating in Eastern Africa and Southern Africa. We have an office in Nairobi, one in Maputo, and one in Johannesburg, where the people working in this region are based. We also have an office in San Jose in Costa Rica for our operations in Central America. And we have an office in Bangkok in Thailand. In Asia, we mostly invest in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Bangladesh, and we are now entering into Myanmar. Last year, we invested 1.3 billion Norwegian kroner. This graph shows our investments year by year. It's going a bit up and down. That's mainly because to do commercial investments in those countries are very time-consuming task. So it can take a long time from we start working with a project to we finish the investment. The graph also shows that approximately half our portfolio is in renewable energy. Finally, I will say a few words about what we have achieved through our investments. We invest in 27 countries, of which 14 are LDC countries, least developed countries. We have 100 investment projects in total. Out of the 1.3 billion kroner we invested last year, 53% was in Africa, 55% was in LDC countries. And there are 265,000 jobs in the companies where we have invested. That's a high amount. It's more jobs in our companies than in the entire Norwegian manufacturing industry sector. Through our investments, we provide electricity to 14.5 million people. And by investing in renewable energy, we have contributed to avoid 3.4 million tons CO2. Some of our investments are in funds that in their turn invest in more companies. I think it's approximately 330 companies which they have invested in through funds. Only those companies, there are 135,000 jobs. We have given priority to invest in agribusiness. We have 5 direct investments in large-scale farms, all of them in Africa. We have invested in 2 agri-funds, which invest in smaller agribusiness. And we have established one agri-bank, which provide capital to small farmers. Finally, we do investments in banks and microfinance. We have done 32 investments in bank and microfinance institutions. And those 32 institutions have provided their borrowers with approximately 85 billion Norwegian kroner. So this was briefly about the importance of creating businesses to create jobs, and briefly about Norfund, what we are doing to help that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lula. So right now I'm going to introduce our second speaker. She is from Venezuela. She works for the United Nations Development Program in Geneva. She is a trade and human development specialist, and her name is Luisa Bernal. Please welcome her.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure for me to be here personally on behalf of the NMU and addressing such an amazing audience. As the moderator explained, I work with the United Nations Development Program in Geneva. UNDP is the UN Development Network. We have a large network of offices in most of countries, but in all NDCs for each for sure. And we work with partners to help them achieve the development objective, improve human development outcomes, and contribute to global partnerships to achieve a better standard of living for the poor. Today I'm going to make a presentation addressing three main issues. The first is what are the linkages between trade and human development. We talk about trade, certainly we know it has a powerful contribution to growth, but this is not automatic, and we're going to explore a little bit what those linkages are and in what conditions trade and trade contribute to growth and to human development. The second is what are the constraints, particularly for least developed countries that are previously more vulnerable. What are the constraints that they face to participate in the benefits of an open world economy? And finally, how global collaboration and partnerships can help to address these constraints and help countries to improve their participation in the global economy. So first, a few words about the human development. What do we mean by human development? Since 1990, with the publication of the United Nations Human Development Report, UNDP challenged conventional views about poverty understood as an income measure only, and proposed an approach based on capabilities to empower people to be agents for change. So human development approach seeks improvement in human well-being as an explicit development objective and focuses on people's power. What can people do to achieve such improvement through individual, community, and collective action, leading to policy, political change, and better livelihood. So from this perspective, the purpose of development is to improve people's well-being, not only by enhancing income, as I mentioned, but also expanding the range of things that people can do, expanding their choices, so what people can be, what they can have, what they can do. So it's really an approach based on capabilities and increasing people's capabilities to take ownership and empower them and take ownership of their own future and development. So increasing these capabilities also ensures that people can actually realize their human rights and be responsible citizens in a shared plan. So what are the linkages between trade and human development? If we apply a human development lens to trade and economic growth, we look at four dimensions. First, what we call productivity, and this is really related to improvement in human capabilities and how can people can benefit from growth and trade. So increases in human capabilities to education and health. Through trade, for instance, if trade effectively increases jobs and informal sector, it would increase incomes and provide opportunities for investment in health and education, increasing the human capabilities, so that is contributing to human development. Second, I mentioned equality. We cannot put aside the importance of increasing participation of all of society in the opportunities that are offered by growth and by trade in particular. So more equitable distribution of income can ensure that all the groups can benefit from trade opportunities and make their own contribution to the best of the capabilities to improving human development outcomes. Third element, sustainability, and this is about sustaining the gains that we have made through development, and includes, of course, environmental sustainability. So how do we use our resources? Are we depleting them with the sake of increasing growth and trade in the short term? So these are some of the dimensions that are an integral part of an approach of human development to growth and trade. So we know, of course, that there are some benefits associated with trade. That's why we certainly try to promote increasing participation of developing countries and the poorest of them in the global economy. Enhanced economic growth and revenue can be spurred by trade. Trade eventually can also create employment, higher paid employment and incomes. Trade can also enhance competition, the dissemination of technology and knowledge, which will have dynamic effects in the economy towards virtuous circle of increasing growth, competitiveness, etc. And also, of course, rate productivity. But the benefits of trade are not automatic. So as we know, these benefits are not guaranteed, and we know that there is no clear evidence in terms of interaction between trade, liberalization, growth, and poverty. Some evidence suggests, of course, that trade openness will trigger growth, and this can trickle down to the poorest, and certainly some countries have growth through trade. But there is also evidence that trade integration can come after there has been inclusive growth and the country is ready to better integrate the global economy. Nevertheless, we know that there is a strong understanding that trade openness is part of a strategy towards expanding growth, and that few countries have grown over the long time without engaging in trade. So certainly there is an important role for trade. The question is, how can we really help countries to establish the appropriate policies to harness the potential of trade and ensure that those that may be affected negatively by the changes that are spurred by trade integration can be addressed upfront rather than be left on the side. So a coherent framework is important and very decisive action necessary to ensure that all benefit from those benefits. Changes in trade patterns are transmitted to households through several channels. We know the prices of goods and services will change. So depending on the position of particular household, whether they are net producer or consumers of a particular product, the income will change. But also we need to think, for instance, the impact of increased trade integration in terms of vulnerability. So a country, by further integrating, may be more exposed to, for instance, volatile prices that we have seen recently in commodities. And this has implications for macroeconomic management and in general for ensuring stable growth. A second channel for transmitting the effects of trade in the economy is through productive capacity. And this means the direct effects that trade policies may have for liberalization may have on wages and actual employment. So import-competing industries and enterprises may feel the effects of lower prices of cheap imports, but also sometimes these cheap imports may also be a key input for exporting enterprises who will be able to integrate at lower prices and increase competitiveness. So we need to look carefully at what the particular context is and how these elements play around. The third channel is, of course, government revenues, social expenditures, the impacts in taxes and transfers that these taxes are allowed to invest in social capital and human capital. So changes in tariff revenue as a result of trade liberalization and reform may have an implication for instance, reducing government revenue in certain locations may actually increase because the economy acts in a dynamic way, and the liberalization or the reform process actually is a virtuous circle that increases trade and growth. But beyond these specific direct transmission channels, I think we need to be very aware that there are a number of context policies that are critical to determine the impact of trade in human development, the outcomes of trade reform. One particular element that is key is, of course, what goods and services are traded, and those will influence the changes that trade may have in poverty. We know, for instance, that many LDCs are specialized in a few commodities export. They are commodity dependent. They also produce a few, particularly in Asia, manufacturing low-skilled like textile apparel. So these are implications in terms of prices, volatility, and the way that they will integrate and the impact that further integration we have in a particular development. So policies aimed at economic diversification, including natural resource management, for instance, for commodity-dependent countries, will have a great implication in terms of improving the human development outcome of trade for these countries. The other major contextual factor is what is actually the overall growth strategy that is being pursued in a particular country. So trade expansion is more likely to have positive repercussions for human development if it's anchored in a development policy framework that already prioritizes inclusive growth and poverty reduction. Such a framework would emphasize, for instance, economic inclusion. So poor traders are being looked at, producers, entrepreneurs, consumers, and there is a robust framework trying to ensure that the poor is not left behind by the possibility created by growth and trade. If that is the overall development framework, trade reform in that context, in a coherent way, will certainly go a long way in creating opportunities. For instance, economic assistance in terms of improving human capital provision, assistance for adjustment, as some countries certainly have had, like in the US, for instance, when they try to integrate it in the NAFTA, so that those that cannot find employment are retrained so that they can take advantage of opportunities created in growing sectors. We heard before the significant problem of unemployment, particularly of the youth. So policies that are specific and are targeting the creation of opportunity for the young, like providing a skill, for instance, so that they can participate in the growing sectors. These are critical elements in terms of ensuring a positive human development impact of trade. We know, for example, Singapore, which developed using an export-oriented strategy, did provide universal healthcare education. Korea also invested heavily in terms of education, research, so that there could be some dynamic effects in the economy, and not only just an approach about growth creation, but also considering what kind of linkages growth in those three sectors will have with the economy and with poverty. A key element, of course, is also the starting point in terms of levels of poverty, inequality, the constraints and opportunities that the poor faces, so, different social groups. High levels of income poverty reduces the demand in the local market. So there is no a dynamic local market that can provide opportunity for local businesses to learn, grow, and eventually take advantage of trading opportunities in foreign markets. A number of factors such as location, ethnicity, occupation, wealth, sex influence the possibilities, the constraints, and the opportunities the particular group may face to participate. Women, in this case, deserve a particular attention. They are disproportionately represented in the formal sector, for instance, They are disadvantaged sometimes even by law, discriminatory laws about inheritance, for instance, number of issues, regulations, lack of access to information in similar terms that men. So they really face difficulties in accessing economic resources and establishing enterprises, for instance. So particular care looking at how women participate, in what sectors they are, what kind of skills can be developed so that they are not left behind. So basically, initial conditions such as the levels of poverty, inequality are very key in terms of looking and assessing what the outcome of trade integration can have for the poor and poverty reduction. In context of high inequality, it is not unthinkable that trade expansion may actually contribute to exacerbate that inequality if there are no concomitant social policies to address them from the start. We need to know, of course, there are power relations, that we live in institutions of power, and how the way different social groups and entities can influence will have an impact on the outcome of policy reform. So there may be companies in the informal sector, SMEs, groups in the rural areas may not have the same capacity, or consumers, by that way, to influence the agenda, the reform agenda, in the same way that organized big business, formal business. So these issues need to take into account. For instance, try to take measures to level the playing field, increase transparency, give a voice and an opportunity to participate and shape the outcome of policy reform to those that are not necessarily on a day-to-day basis in contact with the institutions of influence. So these are elements about the empowerment dimension of human development. Development of basic infrastructure, for instance, to connect rural areas to markets, to facilitate access to finance to the poor, are some key elements that would allow them to participate of the formal market, for instance, and be able then to have a voice in the market economy. Finally, just to mention, of course, the macroeconomic stability, the investment climate. We cannot detach or delink the trade from investment. And a competitive and stable real exchange rate, domestic price stability can contribute to investor confidence, and this will bring capital, both foreign and national, that can establish long-term export capabilities. And of course, increasing investment will contribute to job creation and dynamic effects in the economy. So what are some of the constraints that poor countries, particularly LDCs, face when they try to take advantage of growth and trade opportunities for poverty reduction and development? Well, the LDCs certainly face acute challenges when they try to produce and deliver their goods competitively and to international markets. LDCs share in world trade, in fact, if we exclude oil, is less than 1 percentage point. It's actually half percentage point. They represent 12% of the world population, and still they are really marginalized from world markets. One key explanation, and it resonates with the presentation we just heard before, is lack of basic infrastructure, from access to energy, to internal roads, to networks that can connect markets, the rural areas, so that people can bring the agricultural produce to the urban markets and eventually to export. Water and sanitation, ports and communication technologies. These are basic infrastructure that can really have enormous impact in terms of competitive of the overall economy, and this is lacking in many LDCs, or to a different degrees. So according to some estimates, an investment of 32 billion in African road network, which is the main mode of transport for goods and producers and consuming and to shipping to ports, could increase intra-African trade by 250 billion over 15 years. So that gives you an idea of the strong potential of building those infrastructure. And landlocked countries and higher cost of trade and transportation. Okay, so I'm in trouble here. The productive structure of LDCs has remained unchanged. As we said, they are dependent on commodities, not very diversified, and low skill. This has implications, as we said, for the creation of employment. We still see barriers to market access for LDCs and other distortions in world trade. Of course, we know tariffs for LDCs have increasingly in developed markets, they're almost facing zero tariff already, but then we see non-tariff measures increasing, and this is a new dimension of trade, and they are pervasive, and they have a significant impact in the capacity of LDCs to export. SPS, sanitary, phytosanitary measures, technical barriers to trade, etc. LDCs do have weak institutions, and there is no coherence many times, or coordination in the way policies are adopted. So the trade policy goes one way, employment policy and labor from other, and there is no communication. Skills are developed for sectors that are not growing any longer. So this kind of coordination, which requires certain sophistication in the approach of government and quality of institutions, is necessary, so that they can also adopt transparent structures where private sector can also flourish. I will rush now, I think, the main elements of constraint I've mentioned. In terms of the collaboration, of course, we know we have the Millennium Development Goals were adopted after the Millennium Declaration in the year 2000. This focused attention of the international community on a set of priorities that will achieve to 2015. The deadline of 2015 is rapidly approaching. And to the fact, to the point that we're already discussing what the post-2015 framework would be. The achievement of the MDGs has been mixed, both across countries and in addressing the different goals. MDG 8 of the MDGs actually talk about a global partnership. The idea was to establish a favorable or enabling international environment related to aid, to trade, that could contribute and support the effort of developing countries in achieving the MDGs. The achievement on the MDG 8s are also mixed. There have been some progress through initiatives such as the Aid for Trade for developing countries that was launched by the WTO in 2005. The idea has been to increase aid-related assistance to support growth, to support trade diversification, etc. in developing countries. Flows has increased almost by 80% in real terms since 2005, achieving now or reaching 45 billion. There is an enhanced integrated framework for LDCs that also seeks to help countries to improve their institutions for trade, to address supply capacities, etc. Now, I'm about to finish. Now, moving beyond to the post-2015, how the experience of the NDGs and initiatives such as Aid for Trade and Enhanced IF can be addressed, I think there is a clear sentiment that we need to look more carefully about economic and social transformation, the kind of policies that I discussed, so that you can spur growth, change, for instance, in the case of the LDCs, the structure of the economy, diversify, create employment, and this is not something that will happen just by chance or just by opening the economies. So there is a number of elements that need to put in place, and the question is what kind of goals or targets make sense so that the countries themselves can measure progress towards achieving economic and social transformation, and what would make sense in terms of a global partnership that can support those efforts. So in terms of trade, what can be particular targets and goals on trade? Should we address non-tariff measures that are now prevalent and do have an increasing impact on the LDC's trade? Infrastructure, for instance, should we target infrastructure, including with a poverty particular focus? Gender issues, we know the multiplier effects of policies that invest on gender and in girls' education, etc. If we contribute today having a larger participation on economic growth and trade, we can have increased human development. So the question now is really what kind of goals do we have, learning from the lessons of the previous MDGs, and what we know as well, and the changes in the international environment. One final point, in terms of that scheme, we know that developing countries, what we call emerging economies, have a great role now in terms of influence. They are contributing to LDCs through trade, through ODA, through a number of channels. So a key element also of the post-2015 framework will be what is the role of emerging economies? Would it be, as of to now, an issue of developing countries, or what are the responsibilities of different stakeholders, developed countries, but also civil society, business,
Is this working again? It's funny when that happens. So let me introduce to you right away the third speaker of this evening and the final speaker before we have a break. She is the co-founder of the Social Business Academy initiative in Vienna. She is also a project consultant for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and she is a former participant of ISFiT in 2007. So maybe, guys, if you play your cards right, one of these days, maybe ISFiT 2017, one of you might be standing here speaking at a plenary session. We are very proud to introduce this ISFiT alumni, Marina, Kusama, Vidani.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Wow, it's actually a little bit nostalgic for me to stand here again in Samfundet because it's been 6 years, so it's great to be back in Trondheim and especially to be back in ISFiT. And yes, welcome to you all. I hope you enjoy your time. So I will just first of all introduce my background speaking here. So. I'm Indonesian. I'm coming from Indonesia, but I have been living actually in Vienna for 4 years. I'm at the moment in Vienna working at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization as a project researcher and consultant. But at the same time, I also want to introduce you actually my role in an upcoming social business academy in Vienna, in Austria, which is actually being co-founded together with Professor Muhammad Yunus. Maybe you know him already. He's the Nobel Peace Prize winner of 2006 for microfinance. So, okay, where to begin? I would just want to tell you the story, actually, the comparison, basically, between my time doing a research in Bangladesh in a Grameen company, and actually my time this year in the United Nations Industrial Development Organization in energy and climate change branch. So last year I went to Bangladesh to actually do a research in a company called Grameen Shakti. Shakti means energy, so it is actually a Grameen branch which deals with renewable energy technology. And it was a very inspiring moment for me to be in Bangladesh because I saw how actually Grameen Shakti becomes one of the fastest growing renewable energy company in the world. And it is actually in a way to make Bangladesh the first ever green country in the world. The electricity access in Bangladesh is at the moment only 20%. So 80% of the people are living in rural area, and 70% of them doesn't get any electricity access. So in this statistic, that's where Grameen Shakti and social business or social entrepreneurship actually come inside the pattern. And it's quite inspiring how they actually managed to sell 1 million solar home system in 2012. It is breaking a record, and this 1 million solar home system is being sold to poor people. So you maybe get the sense that renewable energy technology, that's something which is very expensive and only people in urban areas can afford it, but it's not, because that's where Grameen Shakti is actually doing their business. They're going to villages and they sell renewable energy in not only in a cheaper price, but also they sell it in a microfinance, with the support of microfinance. So that's how people can afford it. And so this has been very inspiring, meaning that in terms of development work, actually you can make it sustainable and you can make it affordable as well. And the most important characteristic is that it's continuing after only not only for 1 or 2 years, but it's integrated into the community life. And that is where I can compare it to my time at UNIDO at the moment, because every time we have an evaluation meeting, actually, maybe Luisa can tell also a lot, there is a big lack of sustainability, meaning that when UNIDO, for example, is going to Kenya, they somehow can provide the renewable energy technology based on grant or aid, but it's only for 1 year. But after 1 year, after the grant is stopped, after the aid is stopped, then what happens? Basically, the project deteriorates because there is no sense of belonging, basically, from the community itself. And so that's where actually, I see how business can really support development. Is first of all, it supports and it strengthens the sustainability character of a project. And another thing which is very interesting from my experience in Gramin Shakti is that with social entrepreneurship and social business, you actually create employment in the country itself. So Gramin Energy has succeeded to create branches in most of 90% of the villages of Bangladesh, and it has created jobs for 27,000 poor people along the country. So it's not only a grant or aid for the community itself, but actually it creates job for them. So that's why people have a sense of belonging and ownership into the project itself. And then another thing which is very interesting characteristic from business is, I think, its ability to create and to generate value. I was just going back from Egypt, actually, 2 weeks ago, for a meeting with ILO, the International Labour Organization, because we want to make a project together with them and the social business community. And we want to, we are also speaking with African Development Bank. And when we have this meeting with African Development Bank, they said that actually right now, their their focus is not anymore on grants or aid, but to invest actually in a project, because with investment you actually create value and growth for the country itself. So that's the third reason why investment and investment funding is at the moment very, very important for international organizations. And the fourth reason why business is important is, I think, because, well, this is actually the philosophy of Professor Muhammad Yunus himself. He believes that actually everyone is an entrepreneur, and everyone can make it, can survive actually. So he sees actually poor people more like he has a metaphor of bonsai trees, meaning that it's not actually the seed itself which is wrong with the bonsai tree, but it's the environment actually that doesn't allow them to grow. We all have that seed of becoming an entrepreneur and of surviving, but it's the system, it's the environment that doesn't let us to grow. So that is the philosophy of why it is social entrepreneurship, because it teaches people actually to fish, not to give the fish to the people, but to teach how to fish, because there is a potential for all of us to become an entrepreneur. And it is also something which has something to do with dignity as well, because again, from my time in Egypt, I think, as you all know, there is this Arab Spring Revolution, and there is a big part why Arab Spring Revolution happens is because of the youth unemployment rate in Egypt is very, very high. It's probably in this area in North Africa is the highest youth unemployment rate in the world. So is there actually, there is no job to do in Egypt or in North Africa? There is actually, but the thing is like, is it a decent job? That's the first question, because as Ola mentioned, the youth unemployment is generally happening in the educated youth, right? It's not like people who are not in school, but it happens in the educated youth. So first of all, we need a decent job for creating youth employment, and actually entrepreneurship provide this ability to have a decent job. And I think the most important thing, especially for me and also for you as young people, why actually business or social entrepreneurship is very interesting, is because, yeah, I think it's exciting. Professor Muhammad Yunus said that actually business is 70% creativity, and actually everyone can be a businessman. So, like, everyone here actually can just create a business by right now, actually. So I think the most important thing for youth is that it's very accessible. It's not that we have to wait for like 10 to 20 years for promotion or anything. And I think that's why I'm here, and that's why also the Social Business Academy are being grounded, because we want to somehow like train young people how to become a social entrepreneur. And yeah, basically, like, if you are interested in social entrepreneurship, you can also like, we can also talk after this talk. Okay, so wow, actually that's all. It's like 4 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marina. We are going to have a 10-minute break now, and I have been asked to inform you that any kind of drinks or anything else is to be bought downstairs in the Edgar Cafe. The southern exit is going to be open, so if you are going, please use that exit. During the break, the question team next to the stage are going to take your questions for the speakers, which we will direct to them after the break. Please report to the left, to my right, to get your questions to the speakers. Thank you, and 10 minutes. So, speakers, welcome back. I think we all enjoyed your initial talks, and there's been quite a lot of interesting questions on my note sheet here. But I wanted to first ask some of the notes I made during your speeches. And this is a question for the first speaker, Ola. I wanted to know, you were talking about investing in development, but how can we create more investments in development when the OECD countries and most of Western world are experiencing now financial crisis and low growth themselves? Will these countries actually focus on investing in developing countries, and how are we going to give them incentives to do so? No, you have a microphone there. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. I think you asked one of the difficult questions. On the other hand, it's not countries that invest, it's investors. And it's a lot of funds, individuals, and even countries with much money to invest. For example, Norwegian government has a lot of money, and I think it's a potential to increase the supply of capital to Norfund, for example, so that we can be able to invest more. But I also think it's very important to show that it's possible to do profitable investments also in developing countries, but because it really is. We have good rate of returns from our investments. And I think by going in the front to show that it's possible to make good investments and present the results to other investors is very important. And one example is that we have done that here in Norway. We last year entered into an agreement with a large pension fund, a private pension fund, which looked into our results and found out that this is interesting. We will participate. So we entered into an agreement where they put money on the table together with us. They invest in projects in renewable energy and in the financial sectors in developing countries.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to have the first question from one of the audience, and that's Alberto Lanata. And while he's asking his question, would please Claire Oriva go to the left of the stage and get her question ready. So Alberto, you have the first question.
Okay, hello, good night to everyone. My question is from Mr. Ula. In some places there is people that earn less than $2 per week. They are considered like, let's say, poor, but they own many different goods. Like a person can have 20 cows, farms, and many other goods. So what is your definition of poverty? Because maybe I don't have money, but if I can eat well and have a warm house, I am not really a poor person. And also, how do you get to help these people? Because usually they are in many different places far away from our societies. So.
Thank you. Did I understand you correctly if you asked what is my definition of poverty?
Yeah, because poverty can express in different forms.
Yeah. I don't think I don't have one clear definition of poverty. But what is important from my perspective is to create businesses that provide a possibility to get a job for people who want a job, to get an income from a job so they can get a better life in the future.
And how do you get to these people? How do you reach or find them?
We do commercial investments in companies together with partners. So a big part of the work we are doing is searching for new potential investments. And that's a difficult job, but we look for partners. Some partners come to us and ask, is this interesting for you to participate in? Others we found through our work and get in contact, and we start developing the possibility to make a project out of it.
I think Marina would like to comment on this.
I just want to comment as well that I think Mr. Ola was saying that one of the main businesses that you actually support are the microfinance institutions, and I think that's how actually you indirectly reaching the poor people, basically. Yeah. That's great.
So I think that the next question is going to be by Claire, and while Claire is asking her question, would please Danladi approach the stage and get his instructions. So please welcome Claire's question.
Thank you. My name is Claire Oriwo, and I'm Kenyan. And my first question is to Uller. You just told us today that one of the biggest problems that Africa suffers, which is true according to the OECD, and the energy or the Energy International Agency, Africa suffers one of the hugest problems today in the world in terms of energy poverty. We know that about 70% of Africans have no access to energy and primary energy even for domestic fuels. But what is persistent today in international development is development has been largely defined by outcomes in terms of economic growth, which is one of the key definitions of development, which we see in the terms in GDP, and also development as good outcomes, which is one of the definitions of UNDP, which is measured in terms of human development indexes. Now, my question is, why has development been persistently defined in terms of outcomes and not by means, when we know only too well that energy access could give huge possibilities to thousands of children who die in Africa due to respiratory related diseases, to women who walk many kilometers, like 10,000 kilometers every day to fetch firewood for cooking fuel. Why don't you define development by means and not by outcomes? That is my question today to Uller.
Thank you.
And my second question would be to the middle panel. Sorry, I forgot your name.
I
but
think
my
if
question
Ulla
is,
can answer first, you can just stay there and then ask your follow-up.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think the best answer I can give is that Norfund is only a part of the total aid policy which is conducted by Norway. Our task is to do investments, and we invest in energy to provide energy because that's important, as you said. So that's our mean to help for development.
But wouldn't you, through your means, try to influence development, the definition of it, to sort of like reform the definition of development by means rather than outcomes? Wouldn't you try to influence that to change the definition of development? Because I think the persistent continuity of defining development in minimalistic ways is one of the reasons why sub-Saharan Africa and many other least developed countries are not able to grow. And talking about this, the Millennium Development Goals also do have a very huge problem because they were socially defined, ignoring the economics definition and the environment definitions of development, which could have been more holistic on how to define development. So wouldn't you, through your agency, try to redefine the means, how we define and how we see development?
Thank you. I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay, would you, I think you had a follow-up question for some other panelists as well.
And my second question was, you talked about decent jobs, and I was wondering, what do you mean by decent jobs? Because I think any jobs that could sustain people's livelihoods would be decent jobs, but you talked largely about decent jobs without telling us what you meant by decent jobs in your own view.
Was this also for Ulla?
Yeah, that was for me. I don't think I used the term decent jobs. Yeah.
So for Marina then.
Hello. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the question. Decent jobs. So when we were in Egypt. And we were talking to the international funding organization. They said that actually, as an educated youth, first of all, being employed is also a matter of social dignity, actually. So what actually the society perceives and thinks as something which is meaningful and which is decent, actually. And it differs for every culture. For example, it differs in Egypt as it differs in Iraq or as it differs in Austria. In Egypt, for example, it's called something which is a dignity to work for a government. for government jobs, for example. But if you go to Europe or to Austria, it is a dignity to become an entrepreneur and to be innovative. So it's what I mean by decent jobs is really that when we try to create employment, we need to be culturally sensitive as well, because we want to provide employment which actually matters for not only for the entrepreneurs but for the society as well. Does that answer your question? Where are you? Okay.
Thank you so much. I think Luisa will also comment on this.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make a comment on this issue. Just wanted to make a comment on the definition of poverty. I mentioned that for UNDP we approach poverty, or we strive towards human development, and we see several dimensions of poverty. So poverty is not only about income, but also issues about building capabilities and how people's capabilities can be built through a number of sources and opportunities. So the question about outcomes that was made, I think part of the answer comes and is being discussed in the context of the NDGs. These are means also towards improving well-being and will be targets that we'll be looking at. As I mentioned in my presentation, that a lot of the focus now is how to build economic and social change, transformative change. So that you'll be looking more towards issues like infrastructure, for instance, so that the structure of the economy can be modified so that you can accumulate capital and build on human capital, and this infrastructure will allow you to diversify the economy, improve access to electricity, to services, etc. So these are, it's a matter of the NDGs more as the means, as you were saying. But the definition remains as capabilities, precisely building the ability of people to do different things and improve over time.
Thank you. So we're now moving on to Danladi's question, and while he is asking his question, would please Sebastian Preziani go to the center, to the left of the stage, and prepare for his question. Thank you. So here's Danladi.
My name is Danladi Anagi from Ghana, student president of Garden City University. My question is to Luisa. The structural adjustment program came along with its retrenchment, opening up of the markets, and reduction in competitiveness of local industries in Ghana. So in the quest for development and growth, as we're talking about this evening, how would countries like Ghana and that of others in the sub-Saharan Africa ensure that in opening up our markets, we do not become dumping grounds for goods from other parts of the world? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think certainly many countries have already opened up their economy significantly, both to trade and to investment, and this is now a reality. Some of this liberalization effort has been even bound at the WTO. Now, in this context, how do you move forward in building your productive capacities and ensuring that you create a level playing field with those that can compete to your local market? So part of that is about the lens, again, of capabilities. You need to build the skills to build your human capital so that your entrepreneurs can also be able to produce at the quality and prices that are required at the international level, because this is actually the prices that you are already facing in your local market. Now, there are realities about dumping and unfair competition, and for that there are provisions in international agreements that you can use to protect your market. Now, all of this requires certain sophistication at the level of the state and the government to be able, and even in the private sector, to be able to bring the case, develop the statistics and the proof that you are being unfairly affected by imports that are either subsidized or do not meet the quality, etc. And that this is one of the challenges that I know many LDCs in African countries face, the capacity to actually use some of the tools that are provided by international agreements in a way that can protect their economies, but also take advantage of the opportunities. So there is a need to build those capacities in government, increase coordination between different entities in government, build statistics. That's a major issue in terms of policy formulation, but also for monitoring what is happening in your markets and how different imports may be affecting the economy. So there is a lot of effort to be done and investment in building institutions and capacities to be able to use the tools that you already have.
Thank you, Luisa. We are moving on to the next question, which is from Sebastian. While Sebastian is asking his question, will Oana Moisil come to the stage and prepare for her question?
In addition, I will underline that the investments we are doing is our fund is granted from the Norwegian government as an investment fund for developing countries. So when we exit the investments, when we go out of them one time in the future, all the funds that we get from that investment are reinvested in new businesses in developing countries. So we don't take profits back from development countries to Norway. We invest in development countries, we create profitable businesses, and when we, one time in the future, exit the business, all the funds are reinvested in developing countries.
Thank you, Ola. Marina, would you like to be next?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the question. Well, I can only speak from the point of view of social business of Muhammad Yunus, because that's what I'm representing at the moment. And that is actually exactly the question that that has bear the creation of the social business itself. I see social business, so business is two parts. First of all, it's the mechanism of business, meaning that an institution needs to be self-sustainable financially. So meaning that it doesn't depend on grants, it doesn't depend on an aid or a donor in order for itself to survive. That's the definition of business, actually. But the second part of business is actually the moral question, exactly what you are asking, meaning that what is the business for, actually? And so, like, as we know that actually the conventional business has always been for profit. And that is exactly what social entrepreneurship or social business is trying to achieve at the moment. How can we actually use this business mechanism to actually answer another question outside of profit? So, and that is what social business is about. That the business, for example, like this, there is a company called Grameen Danone, which is actually an integration, a hybrid between Grameen and Danone in France. And financially, it's not really a profitable company. But if you take a look at its impact on society in Bangladesh, it has provided a product that actually nurture poor children, for example, by yogurt products, and that is a social impact. And that is a success by itself. So it's interesting that when there is an evaluation of how successful this business is, we don't see it only from the financial point of view, but also from the social impact and also from the environmental impact. And that's exactly what social entrepreneurship or social business is trying to address. It's this end goal. Can we have actually another goal, another index, another target outside of a financial means? And I think we really need this measure, actually.
Thank you, Marina. I think that also applies to what Louisa is talking about with human development. So, Louisa, I'm giving you the word now.
Exactly. I think the overall purpose that we aim at is really to enhancing the well-being of the individual, as you said. That's the starting point. And the different approaches and initiatives can be seen very much in that context. UNDP, for instance, work with an initiative on growing inclusive markets. And while recognizing the role of profitability, what it tries to do is to bring the concerns of the poor at the core of the business model of these different entities. So the idea is to bring the poor as the core, either as a producer or as a consumer, so that they can also participate in the economy, which is the ultimate objective, so that everybody can participate and benefit from that growth that we are trying to promote. So I very much agree with you. The focal point is really the individual, the human being. A lot of what we do is around it. How can we, including through business, which is very important because it creates wealth that we need as well, and income for improving those the standards of living. But the idea is to put the poor also at the core of some of these initiatives and businesses.
Thank you, Louisa. We're going now to have a question from Ilya. No? We're not going. We're going to have a questions from Håvard. Will Håvard come up here, please?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm Håvard. I'm a student here in Trondheim. My question is to Marina. And first of all, thank you for a really interesting talk and your work with the Grameen. And it sounds extremely interesting. And what I'm wondering is, you say this project with photovoltaic systems for homes in Bangladesh. You say this is, as it is, a really expensive technology. So how do you organize this with microfinance to have small home owners of such expensive systems with microfinance? Thank you.
Thank you, Håvard.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. So, I don't know if I have said this before, but so Muhammad Yunus said that actually business is 70% creativity. I've said that, yeah. And so this is what Grameen Shakti, what Grameen Energy is doing, but of course it's not extreme, how to say, it's not only like that way only to do the business to make it self-sustainable or financially surviving. What Grameen Shakti is doing with solar home system in Bangladesh is that, so for example, if there is one poor family who cannot afford on buying photovoltaic, they can borrow money from Grameen Bank to buy this photovoltaic, but then when they get the photovoltaic for themselves, they rent it. They rent the electricity to its neighbors who actually doesn't have electricity as well. In that way, they have profit. They have income. First of all, to produce the electricity, but also to profit from it. And from this income, they pay the loan back to Grameen Bank, which is very low in interest. And this loan can be done in 2 or 3 years, meaning that every month it's very low actually. So that's how microfinance actually enable people in Bangladesh to buy photovoltaic.
Thank you, Marina. We're now going to have. No, just answer.
But it's not really a question. I just wanted to applaud that system because that is just amazing for them to rent it out to their neighbors. That is amazing. Thank you.
And I think you said, Marina, was it 1 million sold last year?
Yes, it breaks the record of selling 1 million solar home system, which when I said to my supervisor at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, they're just like, how 1 million to 80% of poor people in a country? It's quite impressive, actually.
Yes, it is. So now we're going to have a question. I think this note says, somebody here has bad handwriting. This question is, I think it's from Vihangun. Is someone named Vihangun here? Yeah? There we have him. Please welcome Vihangun. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, sorry for my bad handwriting. And most of the question I had was answered in the previous one, so I have to continue my question. So my question was about the long-term viability of such kind of a project with microfinance, with the renewable sources like the solar panels. But as I know, the payback period of a solar panel system will be like 5 to 7 years, maybe. So what I wanted to know was that what is the in the long run, what is the viability of such project? So I just got the answer as they rent it out and they get something from that. But can you explain what is the long-run sustainability of this as a project? What is the viability of this project for such kind of poor community?
Thank you.
So I believe that's for me.
I think it is. I don't
Sorry.
think Ula is selling solar panels.
I just want to confirm your question. So you ask what is the viability of the project, because you think that the payback period will be around 5 to 7 years.
In a normal project, I mean, like
In
if
the what?
in a normal, if we generalize solar system, so it'd be like 5 to 7 years, right?
Yeah, okay. So it actually really depends on the product itself, of course, because so in the case of Grameen Energy, they have a lot of payback period plans, actually. So there are the ones who are 2 to 3 years or 5 to 7 years. It's just like selling products, actually, and it's like selling financial products, and it depends on which one do you want to take. So okay, so like the viability of the project, I think it's still very viable because, for example, like in the case of Grameen Shakti itself is not a non-profit organization, but it is a social business by itself, meaning that it has to be profitable and self-sustainable in itself. And what they actually do is that they take loan investment from a development bank. Again, this is just like one example of so many 1,000 possibility of doing business, yeah, of creativity of business. But what Grameen Shakti is doing is that they take loan from a development bank, which needs to be repaid in 10 years, for example. And while they are actually giving microcredit to people to buy the solar home system, it will be back in 5 to 7 years maximum. So that's how they actually make profit, and at the same time can lend more to more people. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm really appreciating your project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. So this is the last question, and it doesn't say who this is from, so I think I'm just going to ask it for this person. And this is a question for Marina, and it goes something like this. We are young and really want to know the way to be like you. I mean, how to be a part of something like the UN, how to get involved in projects and help people. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for the question, but well, first of all, I'm not sure if I'm like a very good example for that, actually. Well, I just have to say that regarding the work with Professor Yunus, it's very romantic, but I have to say that at the moment I saw him, I really just have to go to this man and say to him, I want to work for you. And that's exactly what I did. And so like what I mean is that when you really know like what you want to do, just go for it and just go, and you don't have to care like about the CV or whatsoever. You just like sort of like show up. That's the case with Muhammad Yunus. And I have to say that, I mean, this is just like my personal history. Yeah? I'm just saying that actually, like, even if when I came to Bangladesh, I just basically write an email to him and saying that I want to work for you and I don't care what it will be. Even if it is like to serve tea or something, I don't care. But yeah, what I mean is that's joking, of course, but you just go for it because when you do these kind of things, then the other things follow, you know, because like I went to Bangladesh, I went for research actually in the slums, in the villages, in a just extreme poverty villages, and I mean the experience itself has grown you actually, and I mean in the end of this research you get a recommendation, you get basically all the network, and everything just sort of like fall into your in front of you. But the most important thing is that you have to go for it from the very beginning. That's just the most important thing in the beginning.
Thank you, Marina. I think we can all agree that the participants of ISFiT have already taken one of those steps exactly by being here and asking these questions and also networking with each other. So I think you've shown that a little passion goes a long way, and I would like to thank all three of you for being here tonight. I think we really enjoyed your talks and also this discussion. I would like to say thank you on behalf of ISFiT, and also we're wrapping up now. I would like to thank the audience for being patient with us and for asking some really interesting questions. And we hope to see you again soon for the remaining plenary sessions of ISFiT 2013. And thank you, just enjoy yourself, and thank you again, speakers.